Well, it doesn't take a mammal detective to work out whose poo that is. But what about the other animals that are living in and around my garden? Well, let's have a little look. No, Ralph, don't eat all the evidence. Thank you. In the corners and dark places, you're bound to find evidence of this animal. Yeah. There's some droppings you don't want to touch without gloves on. And just looking around in this forgotten little part of the garden next to the hedge, I've noticed something else. On this log that I buried about 4 years ago for beetles invertebrates, there's something that looks like a dropping, but it isn't a dropping. So what is that? So this could easily be the most bizarre unboxing video you're ever likely to see on YouTube. But I'll just carry on here. We've got some more larger ones there. That's pretty much the largest of the lot. What we got here, slightly different colour. So that's our selection. Let's have a look and see what we've got. So if we look at these first two, they are roughly the same shape but completely different size. And the one on the left, that's going to be our wood mice. They were the ones that we saw rummaging around in the hedgerow on the Marshland Mouse Mystery. The others there, ones that I said, you don't want to really handle, and that's brown rat. And those can be quite large. Actually, they can be larger than this, 2 centimetres long. Very slimy when they're first laid down, for want of a better phrase, and very, very smelly, whereas the wood mouse ones are not. There's another characteristic with wood mouse droppings, because they do look superficially quite similar to the field voles that we saw. But you can pick these up, take them in your hand and roll them, and they are solid. They don't crumble or crush, whereas the field vole droppings will tend to smudge if you try to roll them around in your fingers. So these ones are actually, they're like about the size of a pea. You might be forgiven for thinking that this is rabbit droppings, but these are actually muntjac deer. And you can see there's a little dimple in one end and then a sort of kind of tail off at the other on some of these. Some of them are more round and they do look superficially similar to rabbit droppings, but they have little creases down the edges that you can actually see with the naked eye or with a hand lens. So that's muntjac deer. And then we also found these, which are much larger than the muntjac. So these are actually our fallow deer droppings. Now these are clumped up, and that can happen with muntjac as well. But if you take one of the droppings out and actually sort of examine it a bit more carefully, and we remove the clumps, you can see that they are actually larger than the muntjac droppings. And again, they have very obvious lines along the edges. So that's the fallow deer. Both herbivores, so all that you'll find in these is basically digested vegetation, so they don't smell of anything. So now here we have another herbivore, and when you look at these, they're much lighter coloured than the deer droppings, but they're about the same size. These are quite large droppings, and they're full of sort of cereals and grains, so they have that sort of cereal coloured look to them, and that's brown hair. So again, you're looking at a herbivore which is feeding on the sides of the fields, and these are much bigger than rabbit droppings would be, and as I say, the very light straw colour. Now this is the largest of the droppings that we picked up, and it's cylindrical. It's got lots of rabbit fur in it and bits of bone, so immediately you can tell that this is a carnivore. And in fact, lots of the carnivores have similar sort of shape to their droppings, but this is the largest, and this is the red fox. So it's gone quite grey because of the fur inside the dropping itself, but when they're first down they're probably a bit darker than that, and it does smell of fox. There's a very distinctive foxy smell, but as they dry out that goes. But yes, all of the carnivores will have pretty much a similar sort of dropping, except for otters, and I don't have any otters in my garden. And finally, here's one that's quite cylindrical, so maybe you're thinking it might be a carnivore, but it doesn't have any bone or feather in it, so it's been eating cereals. And also look at this white staining here on in the ends, and these are actually not mammal droppings at all, they're bird droppings. So they've been found in the field where we have partridges roaming around, so most likely this partridge, and the white is uric acid. This is the way that birds excrete urine. So if you find droppings that have these very clear bright white stains on them, then most likely you're looking at a bird and not a mammal. What about our mystery object? What is that? Well, to be honest, you probably need a hand lens to really see the detail of this, but it's a straw-coloured object. It's got loads and loads of cereal, seed casings and all sorts of little bits in it. And this is actually a bird pellet. Now, many people are familiar with owl pellets. This is the regurgitated material. It's not a dropping, it's regurgitated material that they can't digest. So it's the things like the bones and fur or feathers that they've eaten. But a wide variety of birds produce pellets, including virtually all the gulls, the crow family, so that's things like rooks, crows, magpies, jays, herons, cormorants, kingfishers, blackbirds and even swallows. Now this one's very straw coloured, so I'm going to guess that this is probably one of the crow family, and maybe magpies, because magpies actually do hang around in that part of the hedgerow quite a bit, but I can't actually say for certain which species that came from. But it's interesting to note that these things are out there, and certainly we rarely get to see them, so it's quite a treat to find that lying in the hedgerow. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that whistle-stop tour. We are going to continue with the tracks and signs theme next time, and we'll be looking at footprints, trails and burrows. Well, even the great detective Sherlock Holmes needed help from time to time, and he gathered around him a group of young people called the Baker Street Irregulars to be his eyes and ears in places he couldn't go. If you want to become an Abbots Hall irregular, you could do what Scarlett did. She asked her dad to help her create a hide in the garden and did a garden night watch. Fantastic. Well done, Scarlett. You are now a deputy wildlife detective.